Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to City Hall. Today is Tuesday, the 6th of June, 2006. We are Los Angeles City Council meeting in City Council chambers here in room 340 of City Hall, John Ferraro Council Chambers. Want to welcome members of the public that are here, our viewers on Channel 35, and those of us who are watching on webcast or listening on Council Phone. This is broadcast live on Channel 35, LA City View, your city channel, and we are rebroadcast in the evening. We are also available through webcast at our city's homepage, www.lacity.org, where there is a wealth of information about our city, elected officials, and our city departments. But you can watch a live streaming webcast of these council meetings if you're not close to a television but have a computer. You can also call into our council phone at 213-621-CITY and listen to our council meetings. Also, our committee meetings are available through that service as well. We invite folks to come down here and testify in our general public comment or on items on our agenda that have been agendized for public comment. We are also available for remote testimony through our Van Nuys City Hall, and folks can show up at City Hall at Van Nuys if that is closer, and we will be able to take your testimony via remote for that. We are awaiting a quorum of the City Council. We have 15 members, and 10 members is 2/3 and constitutes a quorum under our rules. I want to thank the council members who are here, council members Gruhl, Labange, Rosendahl, Smith, Wesson, Zine. We have 7 members and are awaiting 3 more. If we don't have a quorum in the next few minutes, we will adjourn this meeting. I'd like to entreat our other council members to please join us as soon as possible. That's Councilmember Cardenas, Councilmember Hahn, Councilmember Parks, Councilmember Reyes. We have excuses from council members Huizar, Padilla, Perry, and Weiss. They are not expected to be joining us today. So as soon as we have a quorum, we will begin this meeting. If we don't have a quorum in the next 5 minutes, we will adjourn. Thank you. Thank you to council members Gruhl, Hahn, Labange, Parks, Rosendahl, Smith, Wesson, and Zine. We are one shy of a quorum. We have 9 members here. Councilmember Cardenas, we are waiting your arrival, and Councilmember Reyes, who has just arrived. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Cardenas, Gruhl, Hahn, Weezer, Labange, Padilla, Parks, Perry, Reyes, Rosendahl, Smith, Weiss, Wesson, Zine, Garcetti. 10 members present, and a quorum, Mr. President.
Okay, first order of business, please.
Approval of the minutes.
Ms. Gruhl moves and Ms. Hahn seconds. If there's no objection, those will be unanimously approved.
Commendatory resolutions for approval.
Mr. Smith moves and Mr. Rosendahl seconds. If there's no objection, those 2 will be unanimously approved.
And, Mr. President, this is Tuesday, and there is a flag salute.
All right, Mr. Wesson, if you would be kind enough to lead us in the salute to the flag, since you have your American cufflinks on. If I can ask everybody in chambers to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, Mr. Wesson. Wanted to acknowledge a special guest we have today, Rebbetzin Esther Jungris, who's here. We just met with, who was appointed by President Bush to the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Council. We wanted to welcome you. Thank you for being here in our chambers. If you please would stand, we'd love to give you a round of applause, and thank you for your service to this country. I know a number of council members have had the chance to meet her. If you haven't, I recommend that you do. She's an incredible force in this country and an inspiring a story of humanity. So thank you so much for being here and blessing us with your presence. Thank you. And of course, brought by our good friend, Fire Commissioner Andrew Friedman. Thank you very much, Mr. Friedman, Commissioner, for bringing her here. Next order of business, please.
Mr. President, this is time for comments from the public on items not on council's agenda.
Okay, colleagues, now it's time for general public comment. We can direct your attention to our public speakers. We would like to invite Sylvia Hawkins forward as our first public speaker.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ms. Sylvia Hawkins. We must at this time, this hour, not use the word nickel word. We can't follow the custom style of speaking to one another from other countries like Switzerland, saying madam or sir, Africa, saying man, which means male or female, or Canada speaking route to strangers in their country. We are asking, in the United States of America, must not address one another by their title, job, position, name. The public people don't know whom they are, with or without bishop or official uniforms on or off. We don't know their last name or the title by looking at them. We must stop this funny game playing of disrespecting each other. We must only address each other by saying, excuse me, or pardon me, Mr. or Miss. Excuse me, Mr. or Miss, and not by saying sir or madam. We are also asking all gay people not to follow the President of the United States of America, George Bush, in his decision-making of no gay license, since he is following laws and rules of other countries, like London, Russia, Iran, Africa, style of marriage, of many women's midwife styles, concubines, and children, marrying of their father for material and prosperity gain. Ms. Ariana Hawkins and myself are standing for no adultery. The two are one flesh. Please, no special attention and money for gay marriage. Gay marriages of no adultery shall outdo the marriage between a woman and a man. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Hawkins. Next speaker is Bob Blue, to be followed by Robert Silverstein. Welcome, Bob.
Good morning. Thank you. I was quite surprised. I apologize for not paying more attention. Agenda item 3 today, we're going to be talking about issues of eminent domain. And one of the things I wanted to point out regarding the Kelo decision last year is that it does affect all real property. It is not limited to residential property. It affects farms, it affects small businesses, and I think Justice Sandra Day O'Connor put it well when she mentioned, and that's what we really see here in redevelopment, it tends to always move from a lower level to a higher level. I think the quote Sandra Day O'Connor mentioned was, we will replace Motel 6 with a Ritz-Carlton and a home with a factory. You know, it's always an upgrade. And I know beyond my personal issue, it definitely, I'm surprised that you would take opposition to all three measures. I think even the Kehoe initiative was trying to be very balanced. I am quite surprised, and I urge you to reconsider, and I'll talk more about agenda item 3 at the time, but you're really taking a position against the small person, the small business, the small property owner, in favor of the larger property owner. And we're going to be at a position where commercial property is only owned by multi-million-dollar corporations. And I think that's a mistake, and I think you're siding against Kelo on this issue. So please reconsider it or please do give good consideration today when you review item 3. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Robert Silverstein is next. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Robert Silverstein. I'm an attorney, and I represent many families, property owners, small business owners, and eminent domain actions against the government. And one of those families that I represent is the family named the Blue family, and you just heard from Bob Blue. The Blue family has owned and operated a business at Hollywood and Vine called Bernard Luggage for the last 60 years. They are the oldest family-owned and operated business at that intersection. And after 60 years of hard work, and after weathering the lean times in Hollywood when things have finally come back and become better, they are now being told...
If I could just ask folks to keep their conversations down, please, for public comment, so we can afford the public the courtesy they deserve. Please go ahead.
After 60 years in business and after weathering the lean times in Hollywood when things have finally become better, they are now being told you and your property are being taken out so that it can be given to a luxury W hotel project, hardly what most of us would consider a public use. This morning I was at the Housing Committee meeting, and before you shortly in the next few weeks will be consideration of approval of up to $180 million in bonds for this controversial Hollywood and Vine project. We are very concerned because there have been statements made by City Council, by the Community Redevelopment Agency staff, which have assured the public that the $180 million in bonds would be used exclusively for the low-income housing portion of the project. However, in papers filed with the court in the eminent domain case against my client, the CRA and the city attorney are saying something very different. They're now saying that the $180 million bonds will be used to finance the entire project, including non-tax exempt portions of the project, which we contend is a violation of federal securities laws. We're very concerned about these inconsistent statements by the city. We ask that you take a look at this very closely. There have been material representations made to the court, which are very different from the representations which have been made to the public. And yesterday I filed these objections with the court based upon those discrepancies. And when $180 million in bonds are at issue, we would respectfully ask that you take a very, very close look at this. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Richard Robinson. Mr. Robinson.
Hey, guys. Mr. President, members, when you go to the polls today, remember to vote yes on Propositions 81 and 82, education. Sir, the 3rd District County Superior, pardon me, I have the court on mine, particularly the 9th Circuit Court in San Francisco, but the 3rd District County Supervisor's race is being fought over a religious issue. Remember, there's a connection between all of us, whether we are Jewish or Gentile, Buddhist, Christian, Hindu, or Muslim. The Constitution of the United States of America guarantees our religious freedom. The county seal should not contain the emblem of the Christian faith. If other faiths, religious emblems are to be excluded. Supervisor Yep, Zev is a friend of mine, so the Judeo-Christian connection, to my way of thinking, is prophetic. The Jewish Messiah is the second coming of Jesus. In this era of situational ethics and immorality, I look for three qualities in a politician: compassion, honesty, intelligence. Zev represents all of these. He, Mike Fuhrer, Mark Ridley Thomas, Steve Wesley can help Henry Waxman, Nancy Pelosi, Senator Boxer, and Feinstein elect Hillary Clinton and prove that the democratic system works. This election is being held at the tipping point where the Republican juggernaut threatens to control our nation's political thinking for the next decade. James Madison in the Federalist paper, 47, warned us that absolute control of the three branches of government, including the House and the Senate, is nothing but a dictatorship. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robinson. Our next speaker is Matt Dowd.
Hello, City Council. Good morning. I'm thrilled to be here and continue this ongoing political joust. I had a lovely meeting last week with a city attorney, Representative Beverly Miller, and she was actually excellent. The first person who actually I had a meaningful conversation with, because this 4215, and I really need to talk to probably Bill Rosendahl and Philip Tate. We were up in your office the very first week this came down, and we mentioned, why isn't this ordinance narrowly tailored, okay, to fit the government's compelling interest? If you have a look on Yahoo and do a search for narrowly tailored, there's another case in Washington right now. There's a high school or a college up there uses race as a partial means of choosing who gets into that school. And the federal court is looking at that to see whether it's narrowly tailored. So it's the key word right now. But they're saying in the last time 4215 was defeated, here it is, Harry Perry versus Los Angeles Police Department. 3, narrowly tailored. The court must examine whether the ordinance is narrowly tailored to serve the interest of protecting local merchants, commercial vending, okay? This is where the defendant's argument fails, and the defendant is the LAPD, because, and now there's a clause out of this ruling that made it into my agreement, which protects the sale of merchandise constituting or making a political, philosophical, ideological message which is inextricably intertwined with the merchandise. That's the message, is what it's inextricably, that's what they mean, inextricably. And this thing burns incense. It has no more other nominal utility. You know, you don't jack your car up and use it as a block, and you know, it's.
Thank you very much, sir.
So
Next
now's the
speaker
time
is
to start
Michael
narrowly
Hunt.
tailoring, and then you're not going to be defeated.
Thank you. Mr. Hunt is our next speaker.
Good morning, City Council. Back again on the record. I'd like to give props out to Diane Watson, who's actually having a Stand Up for Your Rights convention on the 9th from 12 to 6. And my folks failed to realize that's what it's all about. We're down here because our First Amendment violations have been destroyed. City Council, I don't know how many times I have to tell you, it's not about the N-word, it's about people's rights. Now, if I come in here and use the N-word, you guys feel that you guys' rights have been violated. And the same way that you guys feel, the same way you guys got up and expressed yourself, that's the way I feel. So each and every one of you guys who got up and expressed yourself regarding me using the N-word, well, now you know how it feels, you know, and it was something that you guys needed to know, and a lot of people try and not to listen, but, you know, it's a point where you guys need to really listen. Bill Rosenthal, you have a lot of problems in Venice right now. I'm really amazed at you that you went out to school trying to make sure that those kids and everybody's parents was all right. I would have dropped I would have dropped everything I was doing. You were there. Well, you didn't get no news media. That's pretty sad. But I'll see you tonight over at the hall. It's a lot of issues that really need to be worked out amongst you guys self. If you guys are doing amendments for a word, you guys should be doing amendments for people's First Amendment rights as well. That's number one. That as a stakeholder in LA, your First Amendment rights should be protected at all times. Now, I'm trying to do this nice. I'm trying to make everybody listen, and I'm trying to get my message over without using any foul language. But if your First Amendment rights are violated, then that's a big issue.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Miguel Guzman.
Yes, I would like to speak like this because I went to court and they told me not to use a microphone or my megaphone. And right now, from what I see everybody doing right here, is like every person who has come here before me is trying to say something to all of you, and all of you are having your own little conversation with the partner next to you and not paying attention to what we're really saying. The same reason when we have been in the streets protesting and doing all of these things, I haven't seen none of you supporting a good cause for my people to where I come from. And I feel that if we're going to be run by people like you, we don't need to have no one like you because we could take care of ourselves on the streets. And we don't need nobody to be profiting from us. We are not here to be profit for nobody. We are supposed to rise ourselves. We're supposed to do everything that we have. And for none of you to be making money just sitting right there doing nothing, because that's what I see. And now that, because I have been expressing myself out there, the LAPD now is going to arrest me for stepping on the street, take me, and then release me on the second day with nothing. They just release me on May 26th on President Fox when he comes. What does he have to do over here coming talking to Villaraigosa? What business do they have to do? We are the people. You're not talking to big politicians. Politicians have done nothing for us for years, for hundreds of years. Since the European conquest, we're tired of this already. Now I get arrested. The chief of police says, this time do not let him out. It's like if they know me already. It's like if I'm stepping on somebody's toes. And all of you are the same. You are not paying attention. You're not paying attention to the true people out there. And basically, they have prohibited me from speaking on the mic or my megaphone, so I would like to say what you guys think about that. And then from participating in rallies, marches.
Thank you very much for your comments today. I appreciate your 2 minutes to come up. Thank you. Michael Carrion.
Yes, my name is Michael Carey. I'm from the 14th District. I'd like to say to this young man, you guys here, who he's brought his plea to, have not listened to him. That's why you pushed him to the point that he got to. We're all here. We don't have parking underneath. We don't have somebody to pick us up at home. We have to get here and find our way here. It's difficult. Maybe it's easy for you, it's difficult for us. But when we come here to speak, we like a little courtesy, a little respect. This man's been here for so many times that it irritates me. All he's doing is asking you guys to correct your wrong, not his, yours. You have the authority to do it, but you guys are too busy in your own conversations. You guys just blank people out. People are here for a reason. You made a mistake, correct it. My great mayor does, but he's too busy advertising for everybody else to pay attention to anything going on in the city. Ms. Gruhl, you say you want to raise the parking again. Well, you were there, goodbye car in Wilshire, but across the street you don't do nothing. You have not done anything about it. I've given Mr. Rosenthal pictures, CDs, with over 100 vehicles within a 2-block radius of your city hall. Money. It's all about money. Give us more money so we can take more money out of your pockets, but we're not going to do anything, just like someone stated earlier. We're too busy doing whatever else we're doing to correct the wrongs. Let's start cleaning up our own house. Forget Wilshire all the way up there. Let's do it here. This is a major corridor right here that goes onto the freeway. But all your city, county, and state vehicles are parked there. 5, 6 o'clock. They were told by you guys not to give them tickets. They were told that until you guys do something about it, they're not going to give them tickets. Your own city police are outside giving warnings. Again, warnings to city vehicles. Ridiculous.
Thank you, Mr. Carrion. Excuse me, Mr. Duke Russell, followed by Roberto Carvajal.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Duke Russell. I'm an alumnus of LA City College and Hollywood High School. I have good news. A protest will take place tomorrow at Los Angeles City College at 10 a.m. To save the historic, beautiful men's gym. It gives all of your constituents an opportunity to come and protest. Please notify your constituents, and you can come if you wish, naturally. The gym is needed in case of earthquakes and terrorist attacks. Recently, an earthquake in that area caused terrified neighbors to come to the women's gym and take refuge. This is a safety measure. It's a safety measure for the people of the city of Los Angeles. We need your help. The other good news is football players from Fairfax High School and Belmont High School have signed a petition, you all have copies of it, requesting football restart at LA City College. We all know that other football players from Dorsey and Crenshaw and all of the city schools, the inner city schools, are in need of football at that school. Please tell your constituents to come tomorrow. We really need football back in this city. 6 LA City colleges have football. We are not asking for anything. We have given that school $248 million for playing fields and improvements from Prop A and Prop AA. And what have they done to the campus? They destroyed the football field and the stadium. We want both rebuilt, and we want that gym saved for the security and the future of education in this great city.
Thank you.
And God help us if we can't get justice and equality for our young people.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Roberto Carvajal.
Hello, I'm a homeless person. I'm here to represent the homeless people out here in the downtown Skid Row area. And I'm here to grievance the process the grievance process that is handled by the Housing Authority, the Los Angeles Housing Authority down here on 2500 Wilshire. When you get a residence here, when you apply for a residence through the Skid Row Housing Trust, you're sent to the Housing Authority, and they shoot you back to one of the hotels downtown, and it's called a shelter plus care. And there you're supposed to be treated for whatever psychological or drug-related problem you might have. That's not happening, and a lot of fraud is being committed by these people. A lot of people are going into those programs that aren't homeless. They come in there with their jewelry, obvious drug dealers from other places. They're catered to by these, by the management, by the caseworkers. Incidents are reported to the Housing Authority, specifically Mrs. Soto, who you can read about in my website, robertocarvajal.edgo.com. And everybody's outlined in there. Ms. Soto relates that she's given the grievances to her worker, her boss, Ms. Gillette. Over the 8-year period, Ms. Gillette tells her to ignore them if they have nothing to do with the rent or with monies paid to the rent, they can't address it. I don't understand what exactly the procedure is, but I understand it's supposed to be given to the HUD authorities, and they're there, it's supposed to be investigated. I finally, after 8 months, fathomed out what the process is. I've spoke before the Housing Authority Board. Ms. Winters there. I've spoken to just about everybody. I've documented it, blogged it here. Nothing's being done. HUD is basically ignoring it, just lateraling it off one person to another. The people that are there suffering are what in New York are called MEEKs, mentally ill drug abusers, and they're at the mercy of drug dealers who threaten them or pay them off with drugs. Right now, at this moment, there's what I consider witness tampering as far as my case goes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That closes our general public comment for today. We can run through the agenda. First items, please.
First items on the agenda, Mr. President, are items for which public hearings have been held. And on item number 1, that was scheduled inadvertently, and it should be continued to tomorrow.
Okay, we will continue item 1 till tomorrow. That is June 7th.
And on item number 2, there's a request to continue that matter for 1 week to June 13th.
Sorry. Can you speak to the microphone? I can't quite hear you, Mr. Rosendahl.
Can we make item 1 special and item 7 special and talk about it and vote on it?
Let me check on that, and we'll check back with you. Let's hold it on the desk for a second. Number 2.
I'm sorry, there's a request to continue number 2 for 1 week.
Okay, is there any objection to continuing number 2 for a week, colleagues? If not, so ordered.
And that will be before council 3 through 8, and on number 8, there are 2 reports on the file.
Okay. Colleagues, any specials 3 through 8? Yes, Ms. Gruhl?
6.
Number 6 for Ms. Gruhl. Okay. Number 7, Mr. Rosendahl. And the 2 reports on 8 are for what committees?
From Public Safety and ITGS, and the ITGS report has an additional recommendation for funding of $58,328 from the Capital Improvement Expenditure Fund.
Okay. Mr. Cardenas, did you want to move the ITGS report? Okay. Anybody second that? I'll second that. We have that before us. Any other specials, colleagues? If not, on the balance, can we please prepare the roll and tabulate the vote?
11 ayes.
Next items, please.
Next items are items for which public hearings have not been held. Items 9 through 17, 10 votes are required for consideration.
Okay. Any cards for those?
No, Mr. President, and I believe on number 17, there was a request to continue, to refer that matter to Energy and Environment Committee.
Okay. Is there any objection to referring, colleagues, those two, to Energy and Environment Committee, number 17?
I was going to call it special.
You want to call it special, Ms. Hahn? Number 17. I do have cards for 9, 10, and 11. So let's call those special. Other specials, colleagues, 12 through 16. Going once, going twice. If not, please prepare the roll, Madam Clerk, and tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Okay, those are approved. Next items, please.
On the supplemental agenda, items 18 through 21 are items for which public hearings have not been held.
Okay. We will open those public hearings. Anybody wishing to be heard on those public hearing? If not, we'll close public hearing. Colleagues, anybody wishing to call special 18 through 21? Any items 18 through 21? If not, let's prepare the roll and tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Those are approved. If we can send 18 forthwith without objection, please. Next items?
That would take council back to the items called special.
Okay, let's hold 1 and go to number 6 first if we can.
Okay, item number 6 was called special by Council Member Gruhl.
Okay. Ms. Gruhl, number 6.
Thank you. Do we have someone from the Legislative Analyst's Office here at all? If you could just give, this was a motion that I introduced about the governors may revise and how he intends to use some of the gas tax money specifically to not go for public transportation, but instead to do debt service. So if you could just give us a quick overview.
Certainly. Well, that is exactly the issue. The governor's plan would be to use some funding that is now slated for transit projects to pay down existing bonds. So I think the question would be that the net impact, in fact, might be zero, because we're using money that we already have, or that's already been allocated for transit projects to pay down bonds, so the new money, in essence, would simply be replacing the money that's already there. And that, in sort of an overview, is...
And for us, I mean, we want to see the amount of money going to transportation increase and not stay at the level playing field as we see our traffic in Los Angeles continuing to skyrocket and the problems that we have here. And so, colleagues, what I wanted to do is us to actually go on record opposing this portion of the May revise, indicating that we think the $4.1 billion of state sales tax on gasoline should be used for public transportation, not buying down the bonds at this point in time. I think that's critically important. I know the committee, Mr. Smith's committee, voted unanimously to oppose this proposal by the governor. So I'd like our City Council to go on record strongly opposing the use of these funds for that reason and keep them in public transportation. $4.1 billion could do a lot of good in the state on the issue of transportation and here in the city of Los Angeles. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to be heard on this? If not, let's prepare the roll on item 6 and tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Okay, that is approved. We'll go back to number 1 now. We don't have the committee report from Budget and Finance, but I want to recognize Mr. Rosendahl first and then Mr. Parks.
Do we have number 8 and 16 forthwith?
8 and 16 we'll send forthwith if there's no objection. Thank you, Mr. Parks. And colleagues, we don't have the committee report on this yet, but I know there's an important meeting today, so Mr. Rosendahl, I'd like to recognize you at this time to take up item 1.
Thank you, Mr. President. Appreciate the opportunity to discuss this with my colleagues. Yesterday in Budget and Finance, and I want to thank our chair, Bernard Parks, for doing forthwith with it, has to do with a piece of land, 10 acres of land in my district, that's federal land, that was put on the block with nobody noticing it on Easter Sunday for sale. The whole community was up in arms. Frankly, I am a veteran of the Vietnam era, and I spent my first year as a psychoanalyst seeing 8 or 9 Vietnam vets a day, and there is no excess land in this veterans' property. There's just underutilized land. The federal government has been absolutely irresponsible in how it treats our veterans. Sure, we send them to war and we say, God bless America and God protect our troops, but when they come back, that's when we need to be more responsible. So the county, under the leadership of Zev Yaroslavsky, and hats off to Zev, he is looking at it like a hawk, and we have decided to join in that lawsuit with the county to protect that land for veterans. So today there's a meeting, and I'd like Pete Gutierrez to bring us up to date on it, with the county, where we in the county are going to fight for the veterans. And the whole community is up in arms because, once again, it looks like the federal government's trying to make a quick buck off the backs of veterans. Peter, if you could bring us up to date.
Peter Gutierrez, Assistant City Attorney. The County of Los Angeles on May 31st filed a lawsuit in federal court against the Department of the Army alleging violations of the National Environmental Policy Act in connection with this proposed sale of 10 acres of a larger 300-acre parcel out in West Los Angeles, the VA property. And the lawsuit alleges that the Department of the Army has failed to follow NEPA, and in fact, they have not complied with NEPA. It's our view that the lawsuit raises causes of action that are viable, and we are prepared to join in that lawsuit by bringing a motion in intervention under the federal rules at the direction of your council.
Thank you. Appreciate that very much. And colleagues, you know, the federal government needs to appreciate the local governments. They need to appreciate our land use issues. They need to appreciate our concerns, and especially our veterans for this particular piece of land. So I would ask your support to support us in joining the lawsuit with the county. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendahl. Ms. Gruhl is our next speaker.
Thank you, and I want to, as I did yesterday in Budget and Finance, compliment Mr. Rosendahl for his leadership on this issue and making sure that our voices are heard as well in the federal government to preserve this property. And I shared a story that when I worked for the mayor and we wanted to put in new directions there, wanted to have a homeless facility for veterans. And we had to go all the way up to the Secretary of Veterans Affairs and fight tooth and nail to allow a homeless veterans program to be on a piece of property that is for veterans, a building that was vacant, where we were going to use our own money to actually seismically upgrade that facility and be able to make it function. It's time that I think the federal government realize that our veterans are important, and the facilities that have been, developed over the years and are a haven for our veterans who return should stay a haven for our veterans. And as we see the number of our men and women who are injured in the war, who are coming back, they need these services. And if we take away that property, we will not have a place for them to go. And so thank you, Bill, for your leadership on this. And I know with our joining with the county, we hope we'll be successful in blocking, I think, this insensitive and I think also something that is not looking at the men and women who have served our country to save that property for them. So thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Rosendahl.
Thank you. Mr. Reyes.
Thank you, Council President. I just wanted to rise and join my colleague on this issue, and it's a shame to see many of the individuals who are at our freeway on-ramps and off-ramps asking for some subsistence just to get food and clothing. But I also want to get an understanding from the city attorney. This lawsuit, my understanding is that there is a higher jurisdiction. You do have land use policies that allows the county, the state to sometimes override the municipalities. This lawsuit, are we going after, can you describe what we're doing here? And, I mean, it's easy to say we're suing them, but on what basis and what are, and is there a precedent for our type of action?
The lawsuit
Please hold my time.
The lawsuit is based on the alleged failure by the Army to follow the National Environmental Policy Act. It's similar to CEQA, and it would require the Department of the Army to undertake what's called an environmental impact statement, similar to an EIR, to analyze things like alternatives to this proposed land sale. This proposed land sale and this project has several components. One of the components is the land sale, but another of the components is moving certain operations from that facility in West Los Angeles to other facilities around the area, and upgrading some of these other facilities and building new facilities. There really has not been a meaningful discussion of alternatives. Alternatives is something that you see discussed in the CEQA context, also occurs within the NEPA context. So one of the things that we would see that needs to be done here is an alternatives analysis, looking at a no project alternative, determining whether that is viable. Maybe it's viable to upgrade the facilities that are there. So what we're really would be alleging is that they have failed to follow NEPA, and that is required by the Army's own guidelines. The regulations that govern the way the Army disposes of property and conducts their business requires them to comply with NEPA. And NEPA compliance is required at the earliest possible time, because what happens is, as you know, projects start to gain momentum, and you really can't have a meaningful analysis of alternatives unless you're doing it at an early stage.
So what phase are we interceding at this point? Where are we at in that phase approach?
At this point, the Department of the Army has scheduled an online auction of the site, and they have already made many decisions about where they're going to relocate folks, what other facilities are going to be built. So in our view, they've put sort of the cart in front of the horse, so to speak. They've gotten ahead of themselves, and so what we want to try to do is get them to take a step back, do the meaningful analysis, get the input that would be required under NEPA, and then make a decision based on information that we think may not be available to them at this point in time.
So from their point of view, they've technically addressed all of the steps needed to get to the point of sale, and we're contending with that given the change in the program and change of the job description, and that's our contention?
Our contention is that they have failed to follow the rules that govern the way that they're supposed to do business.
Their own rules?
Yes.
So in this process, there's usually two levels. You've got the technical, legal level, then you have the political level. Obviously, this position will reinforce not only the legal action, but we can also be in a position to be writing our Congress members and the other federal officials who would have some overview of the department, which is the Army. Is there a way to understand how the public and constituents of this district and throughout the city, quite frankly, because I think the issue of the veterans is applicable to everyone. Is there a way of finding out who we can send our letters to, our objections to this process? Is there a way of finding that out? Do you have references?
Sure, and we can provide that information to you.
Yeah, I would love to have the name and titles of those who would have decision-making capacity as this process goes through its course, so that way we hit it at both levels.
And we do have that information, and we'll be happy to provide that to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes. Mr. Rosendahl?
Yeah, I just want to say that my colleague Jack Weiss, who is at a Homeland Security meeting, would like very much to talk about this issue. So I have a sense I got strong support here, but I'd like to hold it at the desk until Jack gets in so that he could comment on it.
He's excused for the entire meeting.
Will they just call
He will be
the
here?
staff
I'm sorry, in 10
that
minutes?
he wants to come in and talk about it?
Great, we'll hold it then. My
Okay, and it's
apologies.
the same thing with 7, which we could talk about now, and then I'd like to put that and hold that for him.
We can wait on 7 as well. We can hold that on the desk.
Okay.
Let's hold one on the desk then, colleagues, if there's no objection, and then 7 we will keep on the desk. Next, we have items 9, 10, and 11. We can take those together. Ms. Sylvia Hawkins, like to come forward on item 9 and item 10 and item 11. You'll have 2 minutes for each one. Again, just
I will begin with number 9.
okay, number 9 sounds good.
Okay. Before construction and demolition for City of Los Angeles material and beginning and sharing of $50,000, we must say no on one additional seat added on for a total of 13 seats to represent our Los Angeles City Hall. This plan of 3-way form, order, and voting style of hiring and teachers, principals, deans of students, bishop, women's must not begin with any firm done program, charter school, magnet school, or organization, but only with one building, the City Hall of Los Angeles only. Voting and hiring for the now must not be done with the newly style of technology, computers, or digital number style because of cheating, computer errors, and not being the candidate background, fingerprints, or public people voting number. It's way off. The United States of America has been deceived with these printouts. I believe that pencil and writing with their hands is 80% chance of them winning and not speaking 2 minutes on the microphone during running and calling position. Los Angeles City Hall job position will no longer have to take 6 months training without paying to gain the United States of America job position. There will be new job position added on, like protecting our animals more than the people. All government job position will be with training, 3 months with pay. As we establish our United States of America new records and documents of resolution of the City of Los Angeles records, I am with no on any more voting for any office position of any court, state, or district. We must go on in appointing at this time with only judges, governors, public people, mayors, and justice system. As appointing the next council, mayor, governor, president, and the job position, as vice president, we must be also aware of the 4-year term job position.
Ms. Hawkins, if I can remind you, we're talking about the Integrated Waste Management Board
Okay, I'm
Reuse
on number
Assistance
11.
Grant and the dedication of land for public street purposes. If you could keep it to those 3 items,
We
please.
must, again, Start off by getting our churches in order with the United States of America government to qualify for these job positions, FBI chief, school chief, police chief, or any official position. We must be married to one another's spouse, to one spouse.
Thank you, Ms. Hawkins. I need you to address those 3 items, or else we will close public comment now.
Okay, I'm almost finished. We are fighting, again, a war that is going on versing Africa and other parts of the world.
Okay, that is out of order. Thank you very much, Ms. Hawkins. We appreciate your time. No, that's all the time, but thank you very much. We appreciate your testimony today. Colleagues, we have 9 and 10 and 11 before us. We can please open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
11 ayes.
Those are approved. Next item, please.
Next item, Mr. President, is item number 17, and that was called special by Councilmember Hahn.
Okay. Ms. Hahn, item number 17.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I introduced this motion because I've become a little bit frustrated in terms of how we are spending our Prop O funds. Our Los Angeles voters overwhelmingly approved Prop O in November of 2004, and this $500 million bond is intended to clean up stormwater that flows into our rivers, lakes, and beaches. It's also to provide funding for various river, lake, ocean, and bay protection and cleanup. And today we have yet to allocate the funds to clean up our water. Many of us around this horseshoe, Jan Perry, Eric Garcetti, and others worked very hard to get Prop O passed. We raised money, we campaigned in our districts, and we told voters to vote yes on Prop O because they would see real benefits, but they continue to wait. 2 weeks ago, Cabrillo Beach in San Pedro once again received an F from Heal the Bay. And since I took office, I've been looking for ways to clean up this Mother's Beach in San Pedro, and Prop O is a good way to do that. So when I campaigned for this measure, I told voters in the harbor area that if they passed Prop O, we could anticipate vast improvements at Cabrillo Beach, as well as Lake Machado at Harbor Regional Park, where Reggie the alligator hopefully still resides. It's upsetting to me and to the voters that more than a year and a half after we passed Prop O, Cabrillo Beach still continues to receive an F from Heal the Bay, and other projects have not had the money spent to clean them up. I know that when voters voted to approve this, they were very specific about having a citizens oversight committee, which we all debated at length in terms of the kinds of people that should sit on that. And while certainly we don't want to misappropriate taxpayer dollars, and we want to make sure there's accountability, and this money is spent properly and appropriately, to me, as we are approaching the 2nd anniversary of the voters passing this November, I think it's moving too slowly. I don't know if it's the Oversight Committee, I don't know if it's our own Bureau of Sanitation, but at this point, I don't really care why it's moving so slowly. I just think we need to speed this process up. So what I'm asking for us to do today is to move this process along. And what I'm asking for is that the CLA, along with the Bureau of Sanitation, report back to us in 30 days with a list of recommended, approved projects for funding with Prop O money. Councilwoman Perry wants this to go to her committee, which is fine, but she's assured me that she will agendize it so that we can still have the vote back to the full council in 30 days. I think enough is enough. Once again, we're approaching summer. Our water is contaminated, it's polluted. People are going to get sick because they're swimming in our lakes and in San Pedro's Bay. So I want to move this project along. We can't keep going to voters, asking them to support something, asking them to spend their taxpayer dollars on good causes and then wait so long for them to see the benefits, because you know we're going to go back to them and ask them for something else soon. So let's get these projects moving. We want accountability, we want oversight, but we want this money spent on projects that will actually clean up our water and our beaches. So I hope you'll support me in this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Labange, and then Mr. Reyes, and then Mr. Rosendahl. Mr. Labange.
Thank you very much. Ms. Hahn, thank you for your leadership in pushing this, because you're so right on that if you have a project and people vote for that project and they don't see results, it's going to hurt our ability. If you could hold my time, I'd like to ask the CAO and the CLA to come to the desk. Because I also, with this motion, members, I thought of an idea. You know, do you ever get flabbergasted when all of a sudden you hear like a project that we approved last October is way behind? And does that flabbergast you a little bit? And what I thought of is that we did our budget, Mr. Parks, just recently. I thought, Mr. President, we should pick a time, and I don't know what it is, but maybe just all our projects, that we get a report annually or biannually, right here with general managers right there. Anyway, Mr. Miller, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks.
Give us a little report on this, and what do you think? What is your feeling? You feel our frustration.
I do feel your frustration. As to your last point, the oversight committees do meet monthly, and we can structure quarterly reports, semi-annual reports on all of the various bond programs. Mr. Fujioka chairs all of those committees, and I sit on them all. Relative to Prop O itself, there are 26 projects that have been moved forward for further study. I think both Mr. Fujioka and I expressed in the last Oversight Committee frustrations on getting projects actually in the pipeline, and we have assurances from sanitation that those will come forward by the end of the month. Also, in terms of the tax levy on Prop O, those ordinances need to be adopted in the summer, so we within the next 4 to 6 weeks, need a solid understanding of what projects may need to be funded, whether it's acquisition, whether it's construction. We have to identify that so that the tax ordinances can be passed by the council in the summer so that the levies end up on the tax bill.
Great. And could I ask the maker of a motion, could we have an amendment that asks that the CAO, since you're the chair, develop a biannual report on all bonds so that, let's say, and I'll maybe have to do a separate motion. Separate motion, okay, we'll do a separate motion. But do you understand the frustration that may be able to cover it? You want to?
If I can just add a couple of comments, what Jerry mentioned and what's the spirit of this motion is exactly what we discussed in the past few weeks. And because the assessment's coming up, we know we have to have something on the tax rolls for this summer. Otherwise, we'll miss a whole year. We will not miss a whole year. There's a balance we are trying to strike, though. It's a balance that we've been asked to strike, and that's working closely with our Citizens Oversight Committee and ensure that they have their involvement. But that balance is a very delicate balance with this committee. We're at a point in time right now where we're saying we have as much input as we think is necessary, and we need to move forward. But the only thing that we ask is that as he and I move projects forward, we need your support to make sure that we can get these forward, because they may not, we may not get total consensus. We'll have some consensus, but we're at a point in time right now where it's time it is time to just move forward. And we have some projects we will be bringing to you to meet the spirit of this, or the intent of this motion. We will be ready.
Okay, well, thank you again, Ms. Hahn, for that. Mr. Miller, thank you. And Mr. Fujioka, I'd like to work with you on maybe a biannual report where we invite general managers in, that they say all the projects at the airport are on schedule, all the projects at the zoo are on schedule, all the projects in public works are on schedule, because all of a sudden, it's the 6th of June. And you don't realize how fast the year moves, but I think it would be helpful if we had just as we had a budget day, we have a capital improvement day in this chamber, and have these departments come in and say we are making these commitments.
We'll take that as just general direction, and as chair of your bond oversight committees, I'll just instruct staff to start preparing for that day.
We'll work with Eric. And last question, does every member of these advisory groups live in the city, or is it
My understanding they do.
They do live in the city?
Yes.
So we want to make sure that they all live in the city of Los Angeles and they're represented the city well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Labange. Our next speakers are Mr. Reyes, Mr. Rosendahl, and then myself.
First, I rise to reaffirm, and I agree with the frustration on the timing issue, and that is very critical because of our obligations in making these decisions. But I also know we have a federal mandate to address our total maximum daily loads, or TMDLs. And these are the balancing technical issues that I believe we're referring to. How we actually improve our infrastructure to clean the waterways and to clean up the contaminants before they get to the ocean is critical. We have a real club over our heads if we don't meet certain levels of cleanliness. I believe it's by 2012, our TMDL deadlines. So there are different approaches. The advisory group has different methods. I am concerned that we, in our haste, do not take advantage of how we can have the best system possible. If we had a report, we would understand where the gray areas are at. If we had a report, we can understand what will be our opportunity cost. If we move too fast, do we give up this project or that project? That is something we need to understand. I'd love to get a feeling for the status update on the catch basin inserts. These are very basic.
We're working on those.
And so I'd like to know how much of it have we done, what areas have been covered, did we look at the very dense areas, the high contaminant areas, how are we prioritizing these improvements? Also, in connection to the big investment we're making as a city and as a region on the LA River Master Plan, where's the connection, knowing that this can function as a framework in which these ancillary improvements can hopefully allow us to approach this on a system-wide basis. So those are the type of concerns and issues I'm hoping we can address when you get the report back. But I do want to thank Councilmember Hahn, because sometimes we do have to light a match to get people jumping, and that's the spirit in which I see this particular motion. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Rosendahl, followed by Mr.
Thank
Garcia.
you, Madam President. You know, this came before our committee, as you gentlemen remember, when I was a part of the committee that had it as a group, and we found out $500,000 was allocated to hire some staff for Prop O, and that was to begin the process going forward. I know Fran Diamond, who's a constituent of mine, is on one of the oversight boards. But last week when I saw Heal the Bay's report card, and they got back on the beach and they pointed out how our beaches are still polluted, and then I went to their event, which was a big deal, I was embarrassed that we haven't moved forward with Prop O. So I certainly look forward to your reports and to the analysis of it and drilling down on that $500 million and putting it to good use. It's a no-brainer. Thank you, Janice Hahn, for your leadership on that.
Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, thank you, Ms. Hahn, for calling this, for making this motion and having this discussion today, and we look forward to the report back in 30 days. There's been an interesting dynamic, and Prop O wouldn't have passed without Ms. Hahn's great work on this, Mr. Labange, Mr. Reyes. This entire council really came together, and Ms. Perry and I worked very hard to make sure it get out there. There's an interesting dynamic that's happening with some segments of the environmental community are saying slow down, because they want to make sure everything is perfect. And I think sometimes they're making the perfect the enemy of the good. And those of us who made that promise do want to see projects move. So I think you've heard loud and clear today. You've said the same thing. My staff's been working on this, and I think this pressure and other pressure that we've exerted, they actually are firing on all pistons now, is my strong impression. They really are moving, and you know, whatever brakes were put on it right now have basically been picked up. But because we've seen some great projects roll out, I want the voters to know the wetlands project in Ms. Perry's district is, you know, bringing wetlands to South Los Angeles, which never had them, while filtering that water is a great one. We just opened a park along the Los Angeles River on Marsh Street, which has a giant grassy embankment that takes all the water of the neighborhood and filters it back and recharges the water. And then what the port and, you know, what the harbor has been promised for a long time, and which was actually articulated in the language of the bond, is also due. And I think we know how to do it now. None of us know how to do this perfectly because this is uncharted territory, but the federal government requires us to bring our water back to a swimmable, drinkable, fishable standard under the Clean Water Act. That's a high standard, but it's one that we can achieve. I did see a fish swimming the other day in the Los Angeles River when I was walking along the Los Angeles River. We've seen in Echo Park, the lake there really improve its water quality. I know MacArthur Park as well. And we have to make sure that folks who are downstream, and we're all downstream from somebody, but certainly the harbor is the most downstream. It's the ultimate arbitrator of what we do on our streets or what we don't do, cleaning up after our dogs, changing oil on our streets, throwing trash out and seeing that wash out. Ultimately, that will be the judgment of how well we are doing. So I appreciate you moving that quickly. The 30 days of this going through, I guess you're recommending go to Energy Environment for the report and come right back here? Or, okay, then that'll be great. Absolutely, and then we can hear it all publicly is a great thing. So thank you, Ms. Hahn. Appreciate it.
Mr. Cardenas.
Well, I think it's important for the public who are watching this meeting that they understand that we do need this report, and we all have some level of frustration when the voters say, okay, take $500 million and let's start working on making some real fixes. But one of the things I need to point out is because a lot of talk has been said about clean beaches, which is critical and what this is about. That's what the voters wanted. And it's also about parks and having green space and the kind of projects that we can actually recapture water to make sure that our groundwater is clean and we have plenty of it. But one of the things that's really important for us to understand that in the Sun Valley community, kids can't even get to school because we don't have the proper drainage systems out there in the flat areas of the San Fernando Valley. So that's what it's about as well. It's not just about parks, it's not just about beaches, and it's not just about the issue that faces my constituency, which is just even be able to traverse your own street to be able to get somewhere when you have a decent rain. Forget about a 100-year rain or a 100-year flood. So this is something that's very critical and important, and I think that if we can move forward together with some urgency, maybe we can help you with your frustrations of the time is of the essence, and we can also help everyone else as well to make sure that we do this. So I welcome Ms. Hahn's commitment to making sure that this council engage more than it has in the past in hearing and understanding what we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Parks.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to ask Bill, during the budget hearings, we talked a little bit about this and seeing how we might be able to get by council district, everybody's capital of improvements from their parks, the sewer bonds and things. And I thought we were going to get a report back to say, can that happen? Because they come in different variations in different departments. Did we get any headway on that so far, or where we're going on it?
As part of this process, we are working on that. What's important, though, is to identify the projects that we can send forward now.
Yes.
We will identify projects on a council district basis, but there are some in terms of readiness that we need to send forward right now. It won't be one in every council district, but those that are ready, and I can think of one that's ready, those that are ready, we need to just send forward this group, and the next assessment will send forward the other group. Because candidly, if we wait until everyone has something in each council district, we'll be next year.
And I agree. I think we need to send forward what's done.
But we are doing the report you're referring to.
Yeah, what would be helpful is everybody got their, by council district, all their capital improvements.
Yes.
Because it's sometimes you read, if you only have one library, it's difficult to go through every page to find your one library. But if it's done to where you get all your capital projects, it's kind of like your Bible for a period of time so you can track them.
Yes, we're close to finishing that report. Okay?
Thank you very much. I just want to add again to you, Ms. Hahn, for bringing this issue up. As you mentioned in your opening remarks, that the community and our voters get very frustrated when they vote for something and want to see it implemented as quickly as possible. So I look forward to us moving this quickly and getting that report to ensure we're able to get those projects funded and moving. So thank you very much. This item is now, I think we're just referring it to committee. Is that correct?
Yes, Madam President.
Okay. Be referred to committee. Thank you. Mr. Garcetti.
We heard item, I believe it was number 3, and I know it didn't require a public hearing, but I wanted to come down off the President's chair to ask folks indulgence. There was 4 public speaker cards. I know they referred to some of the issues in general public comment and in committee, but if we could reconsider that item in order to hear the public speakers, I would move that.
Thank you. Mr. Garcetti moves. We have a second on opening the public hearing. Mr. Reyes, thank you. Madam Clerk, open the roll on reconsideration. Close the roll. Tabulate the votes.
12 ayes.
Okay. That item is now before us. I'd like to call the following individuals: Joyce Dillard, Robert Silverstein, Bob Blue, followed by Ziggy, I'm sorry, I can't read your last name, but thank you.
Yes, hi, I'm Joyce Dillard. You're taking a very unpopular position in the country. This country was founded basically because they wanted a church over here, whether people realize it or not. They wanted the Christian church over here. But the king had control of the land, the king on behalf of the church. And with that, he had manor lords and tenants. Now, both sides of my family came early on to this country, I mean 1600s. And they decided they wanted to stay, and they had a little revolution. And the land is very important to this country. It's important in the growth. We don't have that manor-tenant relationship. We have a middle class. We really don't have a class system other than economically, not by birth. We have opportunity here. By taking this position, you're really reversing the American system, whether you realize it or not. Now, what's your measurement that when you eminent domain that something will work? You have none. You deal with funding, you don't deal with the outcomes. I've noticed a shortage in every agency and arena. There's no reports on true costs of bonds, outcomes, economic benefits. It's all about funding. Councilman Labange had the new planning director in the interim at an event. I brought up the use of the planning department as far as middle class. From what I'm hearing from the developers, they plan for LA to be owned by the rich and the rest rent. And that's what's happening here. Again, eminent domain is very unpopular. We are having a problem with the poor. There are people appearing at other events on other projects saying, I once worked, but I'm older now and I can't afford it anymore. And we need to deal with low-cost housing and other things like that. But public benefit is too wide an issue. Unless it's true and real, we're tired of it. The IRS is tired of it. And if you go to different public events, you'll hear that's what the people are saying now. So I would like to see you reverse your position and really consider this on the overall benefit of what's good for the country, and considering what LA, which is now a port city, and what was New York, what opportunities we can afford to have a regular operating economy with the middle class.
Thank you, Ms. Dillard. Robert Silverstein?
Thank you, and thank you for reopening this issue. My name is Robert Silverstein. I'm an attorney, and I represent property owners and business owners in eminent domain matters against the government. I would ask you to reconsider your opposition to various ballot measures which will be on the November ballot and which would curtail the abuse of eminent domain, particularly in the context of redevelopment. On May 15th, the Protect Our Homes Coalition turned in over 1 million signatures to county registrars statewide. It is a virtual mathematical certainty that that initiative will qualify for the November ballot. 1 million signatures is significant, and people are afraid. People are afraid of losing their homes. People are afraid of losing their businesses. They're afraid of losing their properties that they've invested their blood, sweat, and tears in. And this is not just a theoretical issue. Bob Blue and the Blue family that has been at Hollywood and Vine for 60 years are currently battling the City of LA and the Community Redevelopment Agency, which wants to take their hard work and their effort and transfer it to the W Hotel, hardly a public use. I believe that the concept of redevelopment is noble. I believe that the intent is good, but I also believe that the results are far less comforting. And the reality, in my experience, seeing this day after day, is that the little guy is ground down. That is the result of redevelopment, not to mention the damage that is done to the economy in a very broad way by undermining fundamental principles of property ownership and the confidence that that instills in property and business owners to develop and to build and to employ more people. There's something very interesting from Article 1, Section 1 of the California Constitution that very few people have ever heard, and I want to read it. It says that all people are by nature free and independent and have inalienable rights. Among these are enjoying and defending life and liberty and acquiring, possessing, and protecting property. That is from our California Constitution. We would encourage this City Council respectfully to reconsider its position in opposition to these ballot measures, and we would encourage everyone in November to vote yes on the Protect Our Homes initiative, which would restrict redevelopment of eminent domain abuse. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Bob Blue, followed by Ziggy.
The ballot, the initiatives, and other actions in the state legislature that you have considering now, I would like to distinguish between public and private use. I personally, and these ballot initiatives do not address the issue of public use, which is like a roadway, a school, a fire station, a highway. And I'd also like to distinguish between Kelo versus what we have in California. And in California, under redevelopment law, the only real difference between Kelo and what we have in California is the use and definition of the word blight. And I've found personally, which is very unique at the Hollywood Vine situation, is they specifically define blight in the March 2nd resolution of necessity hearing. And I would encourage you to look at that hearing at both agenda items 1 and 2. 2 had to do with the Academy Theater. And one of the issues I think is very important is you try to go through the whole process. I think on agenda item 2, a KFC owner had actually answered the letter of intent, followed all the process, and if a developer or someone has an idea for a project and the council office approves it and the CRA buys into it, that's it. I mean, anyone in a redevelopment area can be targeted. In some redevelopment areas like Hollywood, residential properties are limited, but still small business properties are affected. And that's why you'll find on the Kelo case that the National Federation of Independent Businesses, which represents 600,000 small businesses, and the NAACP, the National Hispanic Alliance, the SCLC, all sided with Kelo against the City of New London. And I want to make it crystal clear, those of you who vote today on item 3 to oppose these items are siding with the City of New London against Kelo. That's a very important point to hear. Thank you.
Thank you. And your last name, Ziggy, since I'm...
Cruz, K-R-U-S-E.
Oh, Cruz, I'm sorry, thank you.
That's okay. First of all, my name is Ziggy Cruz, and I would like to thank Mr. Council President Garcetti for putting this issue back up. It is an important issue. I know some people know about my history. I've lost eminent domain cases before by losing my job to it, and I'm about to again if we don't stop this. So this initiative, which is hopefully on the November ballot, is utterly important, not just to the people here in California, but nationwide, because I believe that nobody should have ever the right to come in and take somebody else's property and give it to somebody else to make more profit out of it for the city, the state, or the country. It's morally wrong, it's ethically wrong, and it's just a thing that anyone who has property in this house right now here at the City Hall will sooner or later feel the wrath of this eminent domain law. Because if you, Mr. Garcetti, have a property, it can be taken by your very same colleagues. If Mr. Reyes has a property or a business, it can be taken. There's no law to protect you. So these initiatives, to go against them, means you're voting against the little people, those people that have actually brought each and every one into your seat. Now, some might take your seats very responsible, Mr. LaBonge, but I guess not so much him. I figure everybody else in this room right now is paying attention due to the ongoing issue here in Hollywood, and this is definitely an issue that this initiative will protect sooner or later, and I really, really hope and wish that this is never going to happen to any one of you, meaning eminent domain should never take your house. If it does, even though if you vote against the little people right now, you can still come to us, because we will still stand up for you, even though you're not standing up for the little people right now. So please consider the opposition and don't do it. Just stand up for your people that brought you into office. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That item is now before us. Madam Clerk, open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the votes.
12 ayes.
Item's been approved. Thank you. Next order.
Next items, Madam President, items 1 and 7 are still on the desk, and for council's information on item number 1, a committee report has been submitted and distributed to the council members.
Yes, Mr. Weiss, Mr. Rosendahl held this for you today?
Why don't we let Mr. Rosendahl go first, since he held them for me, and we could call, Mr. Rosendahl, we could call both items together. I think they're both
that's
relevant.
a great idea, and Madam President, we will call them both together. As you will know, that on motion 1, it was presented by both Councilman Weiss and myself, and obviously I second or put the motion first, whatever. But we both have been joined at the hip on this issue. Both issues are very important to us in the 5th and in the 11th district. The piece of land that's up for sale, we have Peter Gutierrez. Want to come back up, Peter, in case my colleague wants to talk to you about joining the county in the lawsuit to protect that land for veterans. You know, we give our lives, and those who get injured, who are veterans, need facilities and support. There's no excess land, there's just underutilized land. When it comes to the second motion on the FBI building, it's back to the old idea of a master plan for all these properties that involve community, that we're all part of this. You know, if they were to build a huge structure where the existing structure is on top of what they're there, just think of the incredible more gridlock that we would have in both the 5th and the 11th district. So as we spoke earlier, I would like to let my colleague Jack Weiss continue the conversation.
Mr. Weiss.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Mr. Rosendahl. Mr. Rosendahl is correct. He and I co-presented both item 1 and item 7. These items will put the City of LA on record against the federal government's plans for the eastern and western edge of the federal campus in West LA. And so for the first time, the City of LA is going to take a position against both of these ill-conceived federal plans for what most people conceive of as LA property. I mean, they are federal land. They're not technically subject to local zoning laws, and yet we're trying to send a very simple message to Washington that when Washington wants to develop properties in Los Angeles, it needs to act as close to any other landowner as possible and be sensitive to the relevant local concerns. I'm very pleased with the City Attorney's Office. I want to thank you, Mr. Gutierrez. I know that you all jumped on this right away, and you said, let's not just consider a legal action, let's jump in the mix with the county and join the county lawsuit that was filed this week, and I want to thank you personally for doing that. And secondly, on the subject of the FBI building, look, I've worked in that building extensively. I have several close friends and professional colleagues in that building. I want to see the FBI continue to maintain a robust presence on the west side and in Los Angeles. All Mr. Rosendahl and I are saying is that the FBI needs to do that in a way that, frankly, it's not the FBI, it's the GSA needs to do that in a way that makes sense for all of Los Angeles. Frankly, when I worked in the federal prosecutor's office across the street, it never made a heck of a lot of sense to me or my colleagues that to meet with the FBI, we had to drive halfway across town to Westwood. And it never made a lot of sense to the FBI agents that when they needed to appear in federal court, they had to drive all the way across town to be downtown. That's never been a central location for the FBI, frankly, anyway. I think there are a lot of other locations in the LA area where the FBI would be equally, if not more happy. What we're saying by this motion is the GSA needs to consider a wider spectrum, a wider radius of areas to modernize the FBI's facilities in LA. So appreciate an aye vote, and Mr. Rosendahl, I appreciate how closely you and I have been working together along with Supervisor Yaroslavsky and Congressman Waxman and all the other local elected officials on this issue.
Thank you. Mr. LaBonge, followed by Mr. Zine.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of questions on this here. In understanding the zoning issue there, I remember years ago the post office came in when I worked for John Ferraro, and I thought I was one of the first things John gave me to do. He said, help them, but be fair, but give what you can for the neighborhood. And I asked the fellow from San Bruno up in Northern California for a traffic light at Manhattan and 3rd Street, where the new post office is. And he said, I'm from the federal government. I'm just here as a courtesy. I don't have to do anything, not like a developer. With that in mind, Jack, let me ask as a question. If we have, and hold my time, have we researched what other counties or cities have done? I know this is probably not unique to Los Angeles.
I'm not sure I understand.
What other cities and counties have done in fighting the federal government in issues related to land use?
Well, certainly one of the things that we can do and that others have done is to use the environmental laws, such as NEPA in this case, in the case of the proposed sale of the 10 acres, to ensure that at a minimum, the federal government follows its own rules, does adequate analysis of the impacts to the surrounding environment from their proposal, certainly with respect to the 10-acre property and their use of the property there where the FBI is located. It's the city of Los Angeles that's going to bear the brunt of the impacts associated with whatever they do because of the streets that we have to maintain around there and the traffic. So I think the use of NEPA and the environmental rules is a tool that has been used and could be very useful for us here in this action.
Has anyone met with the FBI to see where, or GSD, where they would, GSA, where they would want to locate? Mr. Rosendahl?
Yes,
Have
sir.
you met with the FBI on this?
There have been extensive meetings by all the officials concerned, Mr. Rosendahl's office, my office, led by Congressman Waxman with the GSA and with the FBI to try to figure out where they want to be. The GSA wants to be there because they're already there, right? Possession is 10/10 of the law as far as they're concerned. We've never gotten an impression that the FBI strongly wants to be there. Congressman Waxman, you should know, also agrees with the position that Mr. Rosendahl and I are taking. He's been working behind the scenes in Washington to try to influence the GSA's decision. Part of the issue, Mr. LaBonge, is that the GSA just won't extend the radius in which they're going to look for possible locations here. And we just want them, I mean, they won't consider El Segundo. They haven't really considered downtown, which would be a perfect location. Those are the sort of places we want them looking at.
But, Mr. Rosendahl, did you have a comment?
I
Thank
did
you,
want to
Mr.
make a
Weiss.
quick comment, and I really appreciate you asking that question, colleague. You know, the problem is the federal government does what it wants to do and doesn't seem to care about the House of Representatives, the county supervisors, or the LA City Council. There needs to be a master plan where we all participate in the process. Just don't shove things down our throat, federal government. Just don't treat us willy-nilly. You know, we provide the troops for you. We provide the monies for you. We are the constituent base. And once again, the federal government was just pushing us around. That's why the leadership of Henry Waxman was great, and Zev Yaroslavsky and my colleague Jack Weiss, and I joined in on that, because we all need to be part of the process of determining where buildings go, how the federal land is used, and I appreciate you asking that question.
Well, thank you. And Mr. Rosendahl, Mr. Weiss, could I ask that the mayor's office and their economic development wing, which is so involved with development throughout Los Angeles, work to assist in this area here, that the mayor's office
It's a very good suggestion,
Mr.
and
Bud
we'll involve
Overham,
the mayor's office.
and
in
also,
this.
as Mr. Weiss said, as a former United States attorney, that you would see it be collated within a reasonable area so that you could walk. So much is done when there is a civic center. And if they were located within the civic center somewhere, it could help that in that area there. But to add to that, I know some of our problems with housing costs, and people like to be there, that Los Angeles then look to make housing, what availability we have for our housing costs for police and firefighters, to look to assist in that for federal agents who get assigned to Los Angeles. Sometimes it's not they get paid, I think they get paid the same, do you know this, Counselor?
That's a good point.
Do they get paid the same if they're working in St. George, Utah? Does anyone know that question?
No, they do not.
Excuse me? They get a bonus, Mr. Zine? I just want to make sure, because housing costs, and sometimes then they get on the west end of town, so they go further north or south. So my friendly amendment is to request that the Mayor's Office of Economic Development work with this motion and to help with the GSA and the FBI possibly locate in central Los Angeles and further work with that. I'm looking for the Deputy Mayor to nod or not. Deputy Mayor, you want to come to the center table? Want to add, or is you okay with this here?
I want to make it clear, and appreciate your, you love this stuff. Mayor's office has been really involved already. I mean, this is something, Mr. Labange, where all the relevant offices and agencies have already been pulling together, all on the same page. Mayor Villaraigosa has taken strong, so we're all there.
I got that, but someone said that no one knows if they've even asked to come downtown and not. I heard that from, I don't know, Mr. Rosendahl, Mr. Weiss in your comments.
I said that there's resistance on the part of GSA in coming downtown. Mayor's office would love to have the FBI build a new headquarters downtown. They've been communicating that. So everyone's, I promise you, this one is a big deal for Mr. Rosendahl. It's a big deal for me. And big deal for Congressman Waxman. And it's a big deal for the mayor.
All right, last with 8 seconds, hold on, my time is for City Attorney. How do you annex this land into the city of Los Angeles? Does anyone could have a question on that? Hold my time.
It's over, Mr. Labange, I'm sorry. There's no time to hold.
You want to have local control.
This is a lot of the discussion, frankly, that will take place as the county and the city join themselves in this suit with Henry Waxman and Zev Yaroslawski. And so it's a great mix. Our mayor is involved in this as well.
Okay, and I've got you in the queue right after Mr. Zine, and Mr. Labange's time is up, so why don't we...
was to ask that the Mayor's Office of Economic Development...
Sure, and I'll
Is there no objection to that?
Yeah.
Then that will be accepted as a friendly amendment. Mr. Zine, and then back to Mr. Rosendahl. Mr. Zine.
Thank you. I have some technical questions. I'm familiar with that property, and I used to work out there, and I worked at the Veterans Administration Hospital when I was going to college. The issue of property rights, as I understand, that's all federal land owned by the federal government.
That's correct.
And it's the federal government that makes that decision. The building across the street, the Roy Ball, is that federal land, or is that city land, or state land, or county land?
I'm not sure. My hunch is that it's federal property.
Well, federal, the building, but the land itself.
My guess is that the land is owned by the federal government, but I'm not sure.
Okay, well, that's a concern that I have, is that we're like the small potato in this big game with the federal government. And I understand what my colleagues are proposing to do, and I support that. The issue is the federal government owns property, and I clearly know that they own the federal building, the land, the dirt that it sits on, the cemetery, et cetera, the complex that they have out there, the hospital. That's all federal land, federal property, the jurisdictions with the federal government. Our say comes after a lot of people. Our concern for the community interest, the community concern, legal standing. We can file motions, we can file lawsuits, we can file all types of issues. The federal government owning that land has full control of property rights. Do we have anything, along with the county, legally, other than objecting, recommending, encouraging, suggesting, any legal standing, or is the fact that it's their land, their property, their buildings, and we can just bark all we want, but they don't have to listen?
Well, we don't have direct control over the property since it's federal property. That 300 acres is actually it's within the county of Los Angeles. It's a little unincorporated island, but it is federal property.
But it's within the county of Los Angeles, but the property right is with the federal government.
That's right. And so what we would be doing in this particular lawsuit with respect to the 10 acres is actually trying to force the government to follow its own rules, and we would not be directly telling them what they can or can't do with their property, but we would be attempting to subject them to a process where there can be meaningful analysis and discussion of, for example, alternatives, where we could have a more meaningful input into what they decide to do with their property.
Can we compel them to do that, or can we just ask them to do that? In other words...
Well, we're going to try to compel them to do that with this lawsuit. There's another issue that's involved in this lawsuit, and that is that the property was deeded to the federal government in 1888. That deed provided that the property should be used to and permanently maintained to benefit veterans.
Right.
So there is an issue that has been raised by the county that we would also raise, which calls into question the ability of the Department of the Army to even sell off this 10-acre piece of property because it is subject to a covenant that runs with the land that requires that it be used for the benefit of veterans. So that's another issue as to whether or not they can even sell off that property, and that's a constraint that's placed on them through the deed that was that granted them the property rights in the first instance back in 1888.
That's what I was looking for, is some area that we could connect with to give some authority. The deed, 1888, you say?
Yes.
That's something of substance. The other issues are our concern, our issues, the community, and I'm familiar with the congestion, I'm familiar with the chaos out there, but the fact is that may be the hook that we have to utilize to compel them to comply with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rosendahl.
Just a final comment, and for the TV guy, I'm in Jose Huizar's seat in case they're trying to figure out where I am with their camera. And I'm looking for a unanimous vote from all my colleagues on this. This is a real joined at the hip with the county and with Congressman Henry Waxman. I really appreciate my colleague Jack Weiss and his leadership on both these motions, and Zev Yaroslavsky on it, and I ask you for an aye vote. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wishing to be heard on this? If not, as amended, let us prepare the roll on this item and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
That is approved. Next item, please.
Next item, Mr. President, there is a special that has been introduced by Councilmember Parks, and the maker of the motion will speak to the findings.
Okay, Mr. Parks, on the findings?
Mr. President, the findings basically is that as of yesterday, we became aware that the MTA is involved in a program that will start Thursday, which is a national, quote, dump the pump day, where they're encouraging all citizens within the city of the United States to drive or use public transportation, so that we can send a message to those who are part of the system that's increased gas prices over 100% since January 2003, that the American Public Transportation Association is moving forward on a national push to have June the 9th deemed to be Dump the Pump Day. I'm sorry, June the 8th is Dump the Pump Day, and everyone, wherever possible, take a public transportation as a means of their mobility. And so we ask that because of the lateness and the agenda had already been scheduled, that we bring this as a special, and that we would support this as a council to support this national effort.
Okay. Anybody else on the findings? If not, let's open the roll on the findings, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
That is before us. Anybody else wishing to be heard on that? If not, let's prepare the roll and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
That is approved. Does that finish the agenda?
Yes. Council has motions for posting and referral.
Those are posted and referred.
There are excuses on the desk. Councilmember Smith requests to be excused Tuesday, June 20th for personal business, and also Friday, June 9th to leave at noon, and those both meet council policy.
Great. Mr. Smith is excused.
And that clears the desk.
Okay. Colleagues, any announcements? Obviously, we want to ask all folks who have not voted yet to get out and vote. We've been aware that there are many voting places that have changed this year, so be sure to consult your voter information guide to know where you're voting, and we're working with the county. They had a shortage of volunteers and had to consolidate a number of precincts, which is why some of those voting locations have changed. But we do encourage everybody to turn out and vote for the local and statewide issues that are on the ballot, as well as federal races too. And we look forward to as strong a turnout as we possibly can. Those polls, again, will be open until 8 o'clock tonight. Other announcements? Vote twice, Mr. Smith said, you know. Per household, right? That's what you meant. Mr. Rosendahl.
Yes, Mr. President. At 6 o'clock tonight at the Oakwood Community Center in Oakwood, we're having a town hall meeting. It's a healing meeting to bring the community together. Many of you know that a student at Venice High School was shot and killed yesterday, which will be an adjourning motion for me on Augustine Crateris. But tonight, the community is getting together. We're going to talk about using the facility more productively for the community, and we're going to talk about ways in which we need to dialogue and work together. So if you live in the Oakwood area, we're inviting you to a 6 o'clock town hall meeting at the Oakwood Community Center. Thank you.
Thank you. Other announcements? Mr. Parks.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make an announcement for the general community that is interested in the Community Advisory, the Crenshaw Redevelopment Project Area Community Advisory Committee will be meeting on Thursday, June the 8th, 5:30 at the Department of Water and Power, 4030 Crenshaw Boulevard, for elections for the Crenshaw CAC, and that includes communities of Santa Barbara Plaza, Baldwin Hills, Crenshaw Plaza, Leimert Park, and Crenshaw Boulevard between Coliseum and 52nd Street. And so a number of offices are available. We'd ask all the community that's interested to come out and participate in that meeting. And the other announcement is that in conjunction with Washington Mutual and the Los Angeles Neighborhood Housing Service, they're going to have 2 seminars dealing with identity theft of your credit card. Both will be at their branch at 4401 Crenshaw Boulevard. One will be June 7th at 6 p.m. and the other is June 10th at 1 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. Other announcements? If I can ask everybody to please rise for adjourning motions. I can ask everybody in council chambers, please. Mr. Russell, if I can ask you to rise too for our adjourning motions. Thank you. Colleagues, if you'll join with me, all members, today in adjourning for former Los Angeles City Clerk Rex Layton, who passed away peacefully in his home in San Juan Capistrano on June 1st, 2006, this year, at 85 years old. Rex was employed by the city for 36 years and served as the city clerk for 15 years, from 1968 until his retirement in 1983. Rex is survived by his wife, Helene, and 5 children, Chris and husband Jeff Jones, Steve and wife Virginia Layton, Robert and wife Melissa Layton, Linda and husband David Slocum, and Kathy, husband Westfall. Also, they have 14 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren. Funeral services will be held at 3 p.m. on Wednesday, June 14th at the Lutheran Church of the Master, 2900 Pacific View Drive in Corona Del Mar. And graveside services will follow at the Pacific View Memorial Park and Mortuary, 3500 Pacific View Drive in Corona Del Mar. Guests are also invited to return to the church's reception hall following the graveside services. In lieu of flowers in memory of Mr. Layton, the family has requested that donations be made in Rex's memory to the American Diabetes Association, 1570 East Warner Avenue, Suite 207, Santa Ana, 92705. We have had the great service of so many wonderful city clerks in the city of Los Angeles. Rex Layton, one of the longest serving ones, will be mourned by the entire city family. May he rest in peace. Mr. Labange.
I just would like to co-present that with you. I worked with him, was the first clerk that I worked. It was very helpful and had a joyous spirit. I see Maria smiling there and doing it and help modernize the clerk's office. And I further ask that the appropriate documents be made available to this council, and we send a representative to his services to salute him for the 15 years that he served, 36 totally with the city. Rex Clayton, a very nice gentleman who did his job well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Labange. Anybody else on Mr. Layton? Are there adjourning motions? Yeah. Well, that is all members. Mr. Labange and then Mr. Parks.
I'd like to ask that we adjourn in memory. We'll get more in-depth information. We just was notified that Mr. William Woodrow Dorn, brother of Mayor Dorn in Inglewood, passed away Saturday following a lengthy illness. Mayor Dorn will be attending that funeral services in New Mexico on June 7th.
Thank you. Mr. Labange?
Yeah. We adjourn in memory of Josephine Salgado. She's the 96-year-old, lived a wonderful life, 96 years old. This month she would have been, her daughter's Helen, was a city employee for nearly 38 years with the city council members Noel and Snyder. We ask you to adjourn in memory of Josephine Salgado. And also, Mr. President, members, on this date I always like to reflect the memory of Robert F. Kennedy, who tragically lost his life from an assassin's bullet on the 5th of June, but died on the 6th of June at Good Samaritan Hospital in Los Angeles. His wonderful legacy lives on, and what a beautiful man that he was, and truly sane, changed America when we lost Robert Francis Kennedy.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Rosendahl?
I had the honor and the privilege of working for Robert F. Kennedy. I was a friend of his. I helped parts of the campaign nationwide, and I was here in Los Angeles at the Ambassador Hotel when he was murdered. And I'll obviously never forget him. His impact on me has propelled me to the point where I ran for city council. I'm sitting here in the city government, and he was my inspiration, and he was my mentor. And if I could do that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendahl. Mr. Zine? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Rosendahl, do you have another one? Excuse me.
One is a generic one. You'll notice I have a red ribbon on. 25 years of AIDS, roughly 25 million people have died, 37 million are infected, and 4 million people will be infected this year. Most of the infections of AIDS came after we knew about it, which was 1996 through today. In the last 10 years, the rest of the world did not get the message about AIDS awareness and prevention strategies, nor, might I add, have our drug companies given them the pills, the therapy pills, to have kept them from the grave. That's why 25 million people have died. It's an outrageous plague on the earth, and I am very upset with the drug companies, and I'm very upset with the world not giving AIDS awareness to young people. We cannot continue to have this disease spread the way it is, and that's a generic motion. And a more personal motion is yesterday, as I just mentioned, Augustine Contreras, a young man, 17 years old, was gunned down in the parking lot at Venice High School a little after 3 o'clock in the afternoon. There were 4 Latinos and 4 African Americans. We're hoping it isn't racial, and we're also hoping it isn't gang-related, but we send our tremendous grief and sorrow to his mother, to the other family members of Gutierrez, and may this young man rest in peace.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendahl. Mr. Zine.
Request to adjourn in memory of Deputy Fire Chief Donald F. Anthony, retired, passed away June 4th. It's a great sadness that the men and women, they announced the passing of retired LA Deputy Chief Donald F. Anthony. Chief Anthony joined the fire department November 1st, 1956, following a stellar career that spanned more than 4 decades, retired on July 6, 1997, with 41 years of service as Commander of Operations. Hugely popular, widely respected, a fire service leader, served the citizens of Los Angeles with distinction in key roles that changed not only the provisions of emergency services in LA, but across the globe. Well-respected man who will be greatly missed by his family and friends, survived by his wife, Laura Lee Anthony, his son, Jim Anthony, and LA Fire Department apparatus operator. A public memorial service will be held Tuesday, June 13th, 11 a.m., Forest Lawn, Hollywood Hills, 6300 Forest Lawn Drive. I had an opportunity, I think Tom LaBonge was with me. Greg, were you there where they had the showing of his life? And it was at the Paramount, Raleigh Studios. He was there with his wife. The place was packed, and there was a reception about his life, his career, and his ups and downs, and how he was such a dedicated man to the fire service. It was really inspiring, and I've seen it broadcast a few times on Channel 35. But a wonderful leader, and it's with sadness that his passing. He was a true reflection of professionalism, of camaraderie within the Los Angeles City Fire Department. I had the opportunity when I was with the police department to meet him many times at scenes. He was always there, the man on the scene. May he rest in peace. Retired Chief Donald F. Anthony, Los Angeles City Fire Department.
We'll do all members. Mr. Smith, would you like to add some words?
Don Anthony. Don was a dear friend of mine, and I worked with him in many years because he was really an innovator and a true leader in the fire service around the country. He was looked upon throughout the world as a real innovative leader in the fire service. When I really gained the greatest respect for Don was, it was in the mid-'80s, and I don't remember the year exactly, when the city library burned down on Grand Street. And I was driving, just happened to be out of City Hall, driving by, saw the flames start, was there when it began, and Don Anthony quickly assumed command of that incident. And they kept putting the fire out, and then it would reignite in another part of the building. And it kind of moved around. They couldn't figure it out. So Don, as the incident commander, said, I got to find out what's going on in there. He put on his gear and went inside the building. His oxygen ran out. They literally dragged him out of the building, brought him back up. He said, I got to go back in. They said, no. He did this 3 times. And he literally was dragged out of the building 3 times. He needed to find out what was going on because it was not a normal fire, and it was such an extraordinary, precious treasure for Los Angeles. And finally, he found out what it was, and that was the rebar that was used in the building, very large rebar, was causing the heat to go around the building on the inside of the walls and igniting different rooms all over the building. But we would have never gotten control of that had not Don Anthony gone in and said, I got to find out what's causing this fire to move in a different way. And then they dragged him out 3 times, resuscitated him, and he went right back in. Extraordinary leader of men and women in the fire service, and a great treasure for Los Angeles Fire Department. I'm sure they're all very upset today.
Thank you for that story, Mr. Smith. Mr.
And,
Lamonge.
his son is apparatus operator at Fire Station 60 in my district, and I was there too, Greg, at that fire, and it was amazing to see him. And as many other incidents throughout the city of Los Angeles where Don Anthony was there, including the methane gas at Farmers Market at 3rd and Ogden. And there's a pole there they call the Don Anthony pole because that's where the venting was. And I ran into recently a city attorney who was here on this whole methane issue, and he said the driving force behind how to stop that and what it's all about was Don Anthony. And everywhere he was an innovator. He truly was a great firefighter and a great leader for this city. And I'm sorry to see his passing in Laura Lee, and I'm glad we had the wonderful tribute to him, and I know how he worked. I know he worked with then Chief Parks as the leader of the fire department and the police department on better coordination.
Thank you. We'll to all members on that. Any other adjourning motions, colleagues? If not, don't forget to vote. And Madam Clerk, please call the roll. This meeting of the Los Angeles City Council is adjourned. We will next meet tomorrow, Wednesday, June the 7th, here in City Council chambers.